Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Like a lot of actors, Matt Damon has a weakness for silly, fashionable politics. But otherwise, he seems like a decent enough guy, certainly by the standards of the world he lives in a business where stars often behave like demanding children, a place where Harvey Weinstein was long considered a moral leader. Matt Damon stands out. He's apparently well-liked by just about everybody he deals with. He gives generously to charity. He's been married to the same woman for 12 years. They're raising 4 daughters. No one's ever even accused him of sexual misconduct, but suddenly that doesn't matter. Matt Damon's career is now in jeopardy. More than 20,000 people have signed a petition calling for producers to cut Damon from his latest film. That movie's already been shot, but the petition demands that any evidence of his voice or image be removed from the film in the editing booth. Other people are saying Damon ought to be denied future film roles, and he may well be denied those roles. What exactly did Matt Damon do to so thoroughly destroy his reputation in such short a time? Well, last week he gave an interview to ABC News about the wave of sex scandals in Hollywood. No, he didn't defend sexual harassment in that interview. He didn't suggest the accusers are lying. He didn't say anything remotely like that, though you'd never know it from the coverage, which in some cases omits any of Damon's direct quotes. So we'll let you decide for yourself what you think of Matt Damon's views. Here's what he actually said to ABC News.
I do believe that there's a spectrum of behavior, right? And we're going to have to figure out, like, what, you know, there's a difference between, you know, patting someone on the butt and rape or child molestation, right? Both of those behaviors need to be confronted and eradicated without question, but they shouldn't be conflated.
Damon went on to say this: we live in this culture of outrage and injury, and we're going to have to correct enough to go, wait a minute, none of us came here perfect. We're in this moment, we're at the moment, and I hope it doesn't stay this way. The clearer signal to men and to younger people is deny it, because if you take responsibility for what you did, your life's going to get ruined. All of that behavior needs to be confronted, but there is a continuum. And on this end of the continuum, where you have rape and child molestation or whatever, you know, that's prison. That's criminal behavior, and it needs to be dealt with that way. The other stuff is kind of shameful and gross. I don't know Louis C.K. I've never met him. I'm a fan of his, but I don't imagine he's going to do those things again. You know what I mean? I imagine the price that he has paid at this point is so beyond anything that I just think we have to start delineating between what these behaviors are. End quote. There it is. Now, there are a couple of incomplete thoughts in there. There's a line or two your average publicist would advise you against expressing in public. But ask yourself, and be honest, how much of that do you actually disagree with? How much is hateful or immoral or otherwise beyond the pale? None of it? Exactly. There's not a single sentiment in that entire paragraph that's not defensible, or that 90% of the American population would find over the top or outrageous. It's all within bounds, or it would have been last year. But because a handful of Twitter users don't like it, the rest of us have to pretend that Matt Damon is somehow guilty of something awful. And if we don't pretend, we may ourselves be seen as collaborators of whatever crimes he supposedly committed and forced to share his punishment. It's terrifying and it's corrupting. This is how reason dies. We're watching it happen. Most of us are too afraid to say anything about it as it happens. Meanwhile, the least reasonable, most extreme voices get louder by the hour. Yesterday, actress Rose McGowan ordered the media to stop using the word alleged when describing claims of sexual misconduct. In other words, everyone accused is guilty. If you deny that, you're guilty too. Weirdly, almost nobody in the media pushed back against Rose McGowan's demand. Before long, they may have to obey her. She has nearly 1 million Twitter followers. She's calling the shots. Let's just be honest about what's happening. Social media are driving this insanity. They're making mob justice the rule and clear thinking impossible. Large portions of our population, and ironically, they tend to be the best educated portions of the population, are now addicted to outrage, virtue signaling, bandwagoning. Social media did that. It turns out it's not that helpful to know what every famous person in America is thinking at all times. It just makes us all crazy and less content. A few weeks ago, former Facebook president Sean Parker admitted that the website he helped found, Facebook, quote, literally changes your relationship with society and with each other. Parker was right. It is all shredding our social fabric before our eyes. Remember, you have an absolute right to say what you think is true. Other people might not agree with you, but that's okay. It doesn't make either of you evil or mean you ought to be fired from your job. It just means you disagree. That has always been true. It was true before smartphones, and no matter what they say on Twitter, it's true now. Joining us now, radio show host Tammy Bruce. So, Tammy, I never thought that I would defend Matt Damon, and I'm not actually really defending Matt Damon. I'm just defending the proposition that you can say something that other people disagree with without being fired for it. And we seem to have lost that.
Yeah, indeed. Look, I also loathe him. He's said some things about the president and about others, which politically I very much disagree with. I don't know him. But he seems to me to be like the blind squirrel here. Every now and then you find a nut. And he's found one because he's right. And you're absolutely right in your assessment leading into this. But as a feminist, here's also what I see in this regard. And I've been arguing from the beginning here that we need to be careful as I saw the attempt to conflate guys being jerks with guys who are actual predators. Yeah. And the women involved in this and the people on the left argue that, well, we don't want him and others to trivialize these serious allegations. But you know what really trivializes them, Tucker, is when you do compare a man, let's say, calling you beautiful as you walk down the hallway or maybe rubbing your back with an act of rape. That trivializes those survivors, what they've been through. And I think that as most people understand that, as we listened to, as you read what Matt Damon said, and this is now our challenge, because this is what the left always does. They use a serious issue that people, we know it has to be dealt with, and then write it, and then abuse it. They go too far. It's like the French Revolution. People begin to do things simply because they can, and they use it for revenge or because they can't stop their rage, and then everybody's going to have to pay. Jodie Foster, I think, said, I saw a headline the other day, that every man over the age of 30 is somewhat culpable for the sexual harassment we now face. I have found in my life it's been men who have been most helpful and the most decent to me, with women not necessarily being so. So this is an issue of behavior. It's not an issue about men or sex, even, as we know. It's about control. And I think that unless we get a handle on this and have an honest conversation, you're going to have the left once again shredding an important issue like sexual harassment and sexual assault because they don't know, they have no boundary of what's important, and then conflating everything and then just simply vomiting their rage out on everyone.
Exactly. And it diminishes the experience of people who really have suffered. I mean, if you lost your legs in an IED and I closed my hand in a car door, and I say to you, we both kind of suffered in the same way, you would say, no, actually, I have my legs blown off. You broke a finger. They're not the same. Yeah. And look, there are different things in the workplace and the seriousness. Workplaces clearly are dealing with that. But we do have to be careful with single voices who have perhaps originally some very important things to say. Right. And then something changes in that framework because they should not be conflated. These things are different. There is a continuum, and certain voices, hopefully voices like ours, will remind people of these things and make sure that we don't have a wholesale, effectively a beheading of everyone who the left doesn't like or that feminists don't like, because then we're all going to lose. That's exactly right. Let reasonable people speak. Tammy, you are a reasonable person. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for doing that. Appreciate it. Well, for 80 years, the Democratic Party was the party of FDR. It saw itself as a champion of America's working class. In some ways, it was. Today's Democrats feel differently about their constituency. The top priority in the Democratic Party today appears to be mass immigration, the displacement of existing workers here with an unending glut of foreign workers. Many of the Democratic Party argued for a shutdown of the government in pursuit of full DACA amnesty. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi even said the parents of Dreamers did, quote, a great thing by breaking our immigration laws. Martin O'Malley was the Democratic governor of Maryland. He recently started a PAC to help down-ballot Democrats. He's going to be one of the people charting the future of the Democratic Party, and he joins us tonight to tell us what it is. Governor, great to see you.
Thank you, Tucker. Good to be with you. Thanks for having me. And Merry Christmas.
So it seems to me, Merry Christmas. It seems to me that the election of Trump opens up, a bunch of questions for Democrats. Obvious one is, who are we going to be? Reclaim our place as the party of the middle class or not? I think they could probably do pretty well if they did that, but that's not obvious from the priorities. Why would the Democratic Party put amnesty for DACA recipients at the very top of the list of things to get done at the end of the year?
Look, I think the core of the Democratic Party remains that commitment to that timeless American ideal of opportunity for all.
Yep.
And were we not a country of immigrants, we would not be the country of creativity, innovation, diversity, which makes us such a strong country. So, look, the Democratic Party believes in the dignity of every person, in the dignity of work. And contrary to some false assertions, there is not a lot of mass immigration going on. I mean, last year, net immigration from Mexico was 0, meaning that as many people left as came in.
No. There has been mass immigration for 52 years, and it's completely changed the demographic mix of the country and the population of the country. We have more than 1 million coming legally. Well, right, but not at these levels. We've actually never had levels this high in American history. That's a fact.
Oh, yes,
and so, and by the way, I'm not arguing against immigration. I'm just saying
in the 1870s, in the 1880s, when my grandparents came
we have
here.
a higher proportion now. But here's the point: if you're worried about wages, which are stagnant, and that seems like an obvious issue for Democrats and something to be upset about, importing 1 million low-wage workers every year does not make wages go up. It's just a math question. It doesn't work. So why would they be for that?
Yeah, here's the rub, though, Tucker. If you have people in our country already, and these DREAM Act kids, the kids covered by DACA, they were brought here at a time when they weren't even of an age of reason when they could say whether they wanted to come or didn't want to come. So the only country they've known is the United States. What's a real drag on wages is when you force people to live in the shadows of a society, to work off the books, to be exploited because they cannot go to enforce contracts, and they cannot, and they're susceptible to being taken advantage of. These are the things that hold down wages. When
okay, so you're saying by
an open society, that's
giving
better for all of us.
Amnesty to people, bringing more immigrants in who are coming from countries where the average wage is 1/3 or less than what it is here, that will somehow magically make wages in this country go up? Why hasn't that happened yet, if that works?
No, what I'm saying is this. What I'm saying is this, that these kids are already here. They have been here for years and years. The only country they know is the United States.
Right, no, I get it. It's a tough situation. Look, it's a tough situation for them, but like of all the issues, I don't know, how about entitlement cuts or the opioid crisis or things that actually affect middle-class America? Why is the one issue they're not going to move on? They'll shut the government down over it. 700,000 people here illegally. It just seems like middle class is not their priority. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but I think you ascribe to the Democratic Party, a myopic worldview. I mean, these kids are important. The fact that 120 of them are falling out of status every day is also important. But the Democratic Party was fighting against this $1.3 trillion tax cut that primarily benefits the wealthy, that isn't needed, that isn't fiscally responsible, that does nothing to make wages go up. The Democratic Party is advocating in states and cities across America for raising the minimum wage, for paying a living wage. Look, we're also advocating for more affordable college, more affordable health care. So, yes, part of that is that we care about these kids whose only country is the United States of America.
No, I know.
I
the party cares about the part about the kids. Governor, thank you.
Thank you. And Merry Christmas. Remember, Jesus was himself a refugee child. What would you do if he came to your border?
That's so stupid. It's hard to respond. Thank you, though.
When was the last time you saw Merry Christmas? You don't see it anymore. They want to be politically correct. If I'm president, you're going to see Merry Christmas in department stores. Believe me. Believe me.
All right, that was candidate Donald Trump in January 2016, promising to win the war on Christmas and do it, as he likes to say, bigly or big league. It depends on who you're asking. Like these cards that he sent to lawmakers this week.
He sent not only this one this year, but also this huge one, which is really probably the gaudiest Christmas card I've ever seen. You know, this isn't really befitting the first family, but more like the King of England or something. But anyway, this is it. White House Christmas card. Kind of crazy.
Okay, on the other side, a pro-Trump super PAC releasing this ad in time for the holidays.
Thank you, President Trump, for letting us say Merry Christmas again.
Oh, okay. So is President Trump winning the so-called war on Christmas? To answer that, we brought back our panel fully revved up and ready to go. Vince Colonnese, editorial director for the Daily Caller, and Isaac Wright, the former executive director of a pro-Hillary Clinton super PAC. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Nice to be back.
Here. Merry Christmas.
Okay, so thank you. Look at that. All right, I'm going to take you right to the polls here. All right, this one is from the Pew organization, about how people feel like businesses should greet them, because this has been a big thing over the last few years. 52% say it doesn't matter to them. They don't care. 32% do prefer Merry Christmas. 15% say Happy Holidays. Those are businesses. There have been boycotts on businesses, as you two may know, over the last few years over what they choose to say. Vince, does it matter to you?
It matters. I think it matters insofar as we as Americans sort of recognize sort of like the soft undercurrent to our conversations, what's actually happening as people say that. And you hear Happy Holidays, and I think a lot of people think to themselves like, well, what you're trying to do is not offend anybody by saying that. Mm-hmm. And the key really should be like, well, stop taking Christ out of Christmas. I mean, really, the whole holiday season really revolves around December 25th, Christ's birthday. Mm-hmm. And people like to be reminded of that. And when they hear Donald Trump say Merry Christmas, it really is not about necessarily just a war on Christmas. It's about the war on Christianity. They'd like to make sure that Christianity continues to be a dominant force in America because, it has been since our founding.
Well, and I do think a lot of us are worried. We don't want to offend anyone, but this is interesting, too. This is from Monmouth University poll. This is from this year about what holidays Americans are celebrating right now. 89% of Americans say they are going to celebrate Christmas. 5% say they are actively celebrating Hanukkah. 3% say Kwanzaa. So if you've got 89% of the country saying, hey, we're going to celebrate Christmas, Isaac, why do you think people are so worried about offending someone?
So this is something Vince and I can actually agree on. I think there is a war right now on Christian values. I actually don't think it's about our holiday greeting and our Christmas greeting. I think that's kind of a distraction. And I think the right wing has sort of created this ruse of a quote-unquote war on Christmas about department store greetings as a way to distract from what Jesus taught and how we actually act on that or not in this country. In the 25th chapter of Matthew, Jesus, whose birthday we're talking about, said, the sheep and the goats will be separated. We as believers will be separated based on how we followed his teachings about how we treat the poor, how we treat the sick, and how we treat the foreigner amongst us. Those were the things that Jesus cited as to what believers will be judged on. And if you look at the policies that have been pushed in the last year in this country, they're the most anti-Jesus teaching policies that we've seen.
So we're going from a debate over Happy Holidays and Merry Christmas right back into politics.
That's not politics for me. That's
No,
what Jesus
that
said.
part is
That's,
I'm pretty sure.
No,
but I'm pretty sure
you took it
Jesus.
to
That's where
policy,
faith-
but you took it to policy.
Jesus wasn't saying that we need government.
Some of us about why we believe these things. Some of us believe our country should reflect the values of what Jesus taught about how we treat the sick, how we treat the poor, how we treat the foreigner.
Both subscribe to that. There are people on both sides of the aisle. There's the prayer breakfast and all the events that go. I've already gotten the invitation from this year. Democrats and Republicans alike say we're going to come together and pray. And they do that on the Hill. They have Bible studies together and everything else.
That's the exact scripture I'm citing, though. They're cultural Christian and they're believers.
The concern here.
And that whole passage is about separating the sheep.
The concern, Isaac, about Merry Christmas.
Just to get us back on track, if that is possible. Okay, one more poll.
Okay, go for
it. The greeting that you choose to use, because this is, and I got to say, when I'm there, I feel bad for the employees because I do think some of them are told that this is our company greeting. You're going to say Happy Holidays to not offend anybody. I always say back to them Merry Christmas, and some of them look relieved. I mean, like, oh, she said Merry Christmas. Okay.
Fight it, Shannon.
So Americans, what greeting do you use? This is not businesses, but just person to person. 67% of Americans say, I say Merry Christmas. 25% say, I feel safer saying Happy Holidays.
Safer. What is going on in America that you have to be
but they're
safer?
trying to not offend anyone. But when I look at this number that says 89% of Americans are celebrating Christmas, saying they're actively celebrating it, I don't know why we should be worried about saying that.
I don't think we should be worried about it. Also, I think that, part of this is remembering what it's all about. I mean, you have to, if you say the words Merry Christmas, you have to acknowledge that the lion's share of the word Christ is buried in there, and that's what, of course, this is all about. And again, this goes back to people being concerned about this idea, this notion of a war on Christmas. Really, this is a proxy for the greater war about Christianity and its place in our culture. When you have nuns being compelled to take on birth control, when you have a situation where coaches can't say prayers with their players at football games in high schools, then you know that we as a country have gone too far. And I think and a lot of people recognize that and they say, you know what? I'd like to have a president who's going to be pretty proud about the notion that they can easily say Merry Christmas without being worried about who they're offending.
All right, Isaac, I'm scared, but I'm going to give you the final word here.
This is not a proxy. This is a distraction from the war on Christian values. The first chapter of Matthew talks about Jesus' birth. The second chapter talks about Jesus Jesus and Mary and Joseph fleeing Herod as refugees, crossing the border illegally as undocumented immigrants into Egypt. Under the DACA policy, were that our country, we would have sent Jesus home to Herod and not allowed him in this country. That is a war on Christian values, not the holiday greeting.
Okay.
Jesus
And
wants us to live out our values, not have the government do it
believers
for us.
not ought to let politicians distract them with holiday greetings when they should be worried about, are we living up to what the New Testament teaches and what Jesus teaches?
They're going to arm wrestle during the commercial.
Yes, prayerfully.
Prayerfully arm wrestle. And we'll let you know how it comes out. Thank you guys for sticking around.
Merry
Good to see you
Christmas.
both. Merry
Merry
Christmas.
The special counsel's Russia probe will return next year, but now it's the FBI that's coming under mounting scrutiny, and for unexpected reasons. This week, FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe went before two House committees behind closed doors for official grillings over the Russia probe. But it's the FBI's handling of the Hillary Clinton email scandal that's suddenly coming into sharp focus. Congressman Matt Gaetz joins us from Florida with new information about his Judiciary Committee meeting with McCabe yesterday. Welcome, Congressman. So, what happened behind closed doors, and what are you allowed to say to us?
Well, Jesse, this was the first in what will be a series of confidential interviews that we'll be having with key witnesses that had a front row seat to the exoneration of Hillary Clinton, which seems to depart from the standard practices and procedures. So I can't share with you the specific questions or answers. I can share with you my reactions to them, and I can tell you three things that have been confirmed for me. First, Hillary Clinton absolutely got special treatment. Her process departed from the standard process most Americans would face. Second, she received that special treatment because she was a candidate for president. No other reason. Third thing that we absolutely know, there were people in the highest levels of this government that were doing everything possible to make sure that Hillary Clinton did not face consequences. Some of those very people have now migrated over to the Mueller probe and are persecuting the president of the United States without a valid basis. And that's why the work we're doing in the Judiciary Committee is so important.
All right, that's very interesting. So we all know that Hillary got special treatment from, the tarmac meeting to writing an exoneration letter before exonerating her, to softening the language to take out the criminality, to, she went in for an interview and wasn't under oath. So we know that happened. At this point, what are you going to do about it?
Well, we have to change the laws so that this can never happen again. We've also got to find out whether or not some of the bribes paid to the Clinton Foundation are actively disrupting the policies and priorities of the United States on a going forward basis. And until we have a thorough investigation of the potential bribes that the Clinton Foundation took and then the actions that fell as a consequence of those bribes, I fear that we won't truly know the depth of the corruption in the last administration. But we've got to change the laws so that never again can we have a circumstance where someone gets special treatment because of their political status or because they're a candidate for high office. That is not the blind lady justice that we promise the American people in this country under our Constitution, Jesse.
I agree with that 100%. So are you calling for a new or second special counsel to investigate Hillary and the foundation and all that?
Well, for 5 months now, Jesse, over 20 members of the Judiciary Committee have been calling for a second special counsel to investigate the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton email server, and the entire handling of that process. But what's so troubling to me is that the Attorney General has been sitting on his hands. Despite the fact that we've had these calls for a second special counsel, the Attorney General hasn't done it. And it's just a double standard when you've got this special counsel that has a limitless budget, limitless authority persecuting the president, and we're not looking at the real crimes from the real criminals.
Okay, so can I ask you, I know you're not allowed to say everything, but did you ask McCabe about that meeting where it was the FBI agent who hated Trump and his mistress? They were in this meeting and they talked about protecting the country from a Trump presidency and taking out an insurance policy if Trump was elected president. Did you ask about that?
Well, Jesse, I can't go into the specific questions asked and the answers provided, but I will say that when you look at the commentary from the mainstream media on that, they're just spinning because they have no idea how to explain it. But the American people.
All right, listen, I'm going to assume
that
you asked about that because that is huge. I would assume that you did. Now, this is just breaking. I don't know if you know about it, but it looks like James Baker, who was the top lawyer in the FBI, was just reassigned. Turns out they found he had contact with this left-wing outfit, Mother Jones and David Corn. And 2 weeks later, after he had contact with him, they break the dossier story. Seems really suspicious.
Yeah, I don't think James Baker is a lawyer in this fact pattern anymore. I believe that Mr. Baker is a witness. And because he's a witness, I think he very well may be one of the next people called before one of these committees conducting a fact-based investigation, because certainly we've had at the very highest levels of the FBI and the Department of Justice a number of contaminating events that erode the American people's confidence in the unbiased nature of these critical institutions.
Well, it seems like the more people investigate, it's the Democrats that look guilty of corruption, not Trump. But we'll see. You know, anything could happen. And Congressman Gates, thanks for your service.
Thank you, Jesse.